ecstasy. I ain't slept in weeks, I ain't never left the streets. Foreign car, leather seats, fresh jeans, fresh shoes on my legs and feet. Foreign car crawling like a leopard creep. Sucker free like they got leprosy. Money same color as a lettuce seed. Thoroughbred pedigree, loud pack regularly. No regular treat. I ain't playing like a referee. I shove lead in the heat. Shots fired, heat left to his feet. I ain't playing, make him rest in peace. If he wreck with me, I display weaponry.
You guys know about the orphan trains? A buddy of mine is working on an article about this recently, and I feel like it's something we should talk about more. From the 1850s until 1929, there was an absolute explosion in orphaned and homeless children in the United States, with an estimated 30,000 plus children between the ages of 6 and 18 in New York City alone. This guy, Charles Laurie Brace, the founder of the Children's Aid Society, decides that the solution to this is a train. He and his organization would go down to the streets, scoop up orphaned children, and then put them on a train and send them westward, with the theory that there were several good farming homes on the West Coast that could use some extra children. Oh, but wait. Then they would send out these flyers to cities that they were planning to stop at, being like, hey, we have children, you want some? And then the train would arrive downtown. The children would be put on a platform where people who were interested could come and examine them, check their teeth, see if they were good looking, whatever. Sometimes the children would sing or dance to seem more desirable to a prospective household. And these would-be parents would just have to sign a paper being like, I promise not to abuse this child, and then they could take them home. Now, in a very theoretical approach, there were a lot of good ideas behind this practice. These were orphans abandoned on the streets who were now being given an opportunity for a new home. But of course, you've probably seen all the errors in this plan already. Not only did several farming families use this as an opportunity to essentially procure an indentured servant for their farm, but it also opened up hundreds of thousands of children to the possibility of abuse. In some cases, children were scooped up off the street even if they had homes. If they couldn't prove their parentage in that moment and they looked like an orphan, they would be put on a train and separated from their families forever. And by the time they arrived at these destinations, siblings would often be separated if families didn't want more than one child. It's a saga definitely worth looking into more because the orphan trains are a huge part of American history that really doesn't get talked about nearly enough. Do you guys know?
The question becomes, where are the people? And the answer may be more shocking than you expect. The architecture aside, we're told that a disproportionate amount of people were locked away in mental asylums in the mid-1800s in America. Another key component to understanding America in the 1800s is to understand just how many asylums were being built. Not just a small building, a little retreat, or a doctor's office, but we're discussing over 500 massive, castle-like structures, usually built in a Kirkbride plan, in large forested areas, away from the public. These buildings employed the finest of European architectural designs, and most of these asylums, almshouses, and sanitation centers were later converted into prisons or torn down entirely. But why were all of these asylums being built, especially in the Northeast? When we look at photographs of the large empty cities, sometimes we see a disproportionate number of children in the streets. Often, we're told that the photographs would be taken first thing in the morning when the streets were nearly empty, yet we often see these large packs of children seemingly roaming the streets unattended. How does this tie into the overarching narrative? Well, by the 1840s, large portions of the northern states had freed their enslaved people. This is a claim that we often see cited in many history books. What we don't see mentioned in the history books is, many times, the freed people were almost instantaneously locked away in asylums and sanitation centers. Hence, why we have so many of the large asylums being created in the early to mid-1800s. Think of the saying, seeking asylum. It wasn't just African Americans who faced these hardships. We also have countless indigenous people facing the same fate, as well as anyone really perceived by the larger society to be different. We're told, according to the official 1840 census, which was the first to report individuals as, quote, insane, that large numbers of newly freed individuals in northern states, in some reports, upwards of 40%, were locked away in asylums and considered to be insane. This becomes even more alarming when the results are compared with the census numbers for enslaved individuals in the South, where the number of individuals marked as, quote, insane was nowhere near as high. Politics aside, we can see how even when the freedmen were freed, they never really achieved their freedom from the tyrants and often faced even more hardships. The tragedy becomes the children of these individuals. And this is where our story really begins to come full circle. Before 1853, there was essentially no place for the children of the insane to be housed. Many times, according to this narrative, these children would have to commit crimes just to get locked up and be taken off of the streets.
Oh my days. Now this is how you can rewrite history, with the orphan trains. So the orphan train movement was a supervised welfare program that transported children from crowded eastern cities of the United States to foster homes, located largely in the rural areas of the Midwest. The orphan trains operated between 1854 and 1929, relocating about 250,000 children. So let's do the maths. Imagine when these children grow up, they have 2 or 3 children of their own. Let's say 250,000 times 3. You're looking at 750,000 adults that had their names changed and their place of birth changed. How would you know who's who? Or how would you know who you really are? By the looks of it, this was big business. And of course, there was corruption. And what I want to know is, where was all the parents? You see, it's not hard to rewrite history. All you need to do is get rid of all the parents and elders, relocate the children, and you can teach them anything, and they will believe you. Oh.
New York City had 4 foundling asylums alone that processed thousands of children annually. By the beginning of the 20th century, Italy was reporting 32,000 children per year. Spain and Portugal were reporting 15,000 annual foundlings. Before 1860, 374,000 recorded infants were processed by the asylums in Milan, Naples, and Florence alone. Historian David L. Ransell states that Moscow was receiving between 16 and 18,000 infants annually by the 1880s, and sending over 10,000 of these each year to outlying villages for care. In 1882, there were all told 41,720 foundlings from the Moscow home, living with 32,000 foster families, scattered throughout 4,418 villages. A dozen villages had over 90 fosterings each. One thing that is often overlooked is that there were a series of laws passed in the 1800s, making it almost impossible for unwed mothers to keep their babies. The 1833 Poor Law Reformation introduced bastardy clauses that shifted the entire responsibility for the illegitimate child onto the mother. Social stigma meant that she would not be able to provide care for her child and would be forced to hand them over to the authorities, or worse. Advertisements for adoption or nurse care became popular in newspapers. And, as many scholars have pointed out, these were a front for what was termed baby farmers, or paid murder. As Dorothy L. Haller states, the adverts may have been misleading to the general public, but read like a coded message to unwed mothers. No references are asked for, and none are offered. The sum of 15 shillings a week to keep an infant or a sickly child was inadequate, and a sickly child and an infant under 2 months were the least likely to survive, and the cheapest to bury. Infants were taken, no questions asked, and it was understood that for £12 no questions were expected to be asked. The transaction between the mother and the baby farmer usually took place in a public place, on public transportation, or through a second party. No personal information was exchanged. The money was paid, and the transaction was complete. The mother knew she would never see her infant alive again. Most children, however, were not murdered, but were dropped off at the doorsteps of New York City.
Oh, We've got your ass. We've got your ass now. There's nothing new under the sun. Anything they're doing now has already been done. What you know about artificial humans and clones, at these world fairs, they would have incubators with premature babies on display. And people would come and pay just to look at these babies for entertainment. But you see, the thing is, that's what these elites like to do. They like to get you involved in their corruption and even charge you for it. People often ask me, after the last reset, where did they get all the people to repopulate the cities? And with the orphan trains, where did they get all the orphans from? And where was the parents? But that's just it. These children didn't have no parents. They was artificially created in these labs. And some was put on display at these fairs. Baby incubators for sale. Complete installations as operated by us. To hospitals and amusement parks. Like, it's one thing to have a baby incubator. But where are you getting all of these babies from? We make jokes about people being NPCs, bots, or soulless. But that's just the thing. Some things ain't a joke, because some things just ain't funny. Oh.
Repeatedly locked her inside a small container that was kept in the attic.
I could not really sit up straight. I definitely couldn't stand up. And you really couldn't lay down flat.
And sexually abused her.
After whatever happened in her bedroom, she'd bring me by the hair and bring me back to my bed. Of course, before that, she'd spank me in her room. She'd tell me I was a bad girl.
Stories like that popping up about the orphan trains and the orphanages are all over YouTube, all over the internet. I suggest you look into it, come up with your own ideas. If any of this seems odd to you, make sure you comment, like, and share. Also, stick around because I will be diving into who funded these orphans.
And the last continent to experience such mass exodus of orphans was the United States. And it is here that we see evidence of the orphan trains. The first group of these orphans arrived in Michigan in 1854. And from that moment on, the movement shipped hundreds of thousands of children across the states until it ended in 1929. Officially, there were over 97 institutions involved in orphans and orphan trains in the 19th century. And again, this was not just the United States. Annie McPherson will go down in history as a woman who scammed more than 100,000 foundlings and shipped them from the United Kingdom to Canada, New Zealand, and South Africa, and even to the outer edges of the earth in Australia, so that they could be sold into child labor. Why do we see so many photographs of orphans in workhouses? Why are they working with machinery created for adult use? Were there not enough adults during this time to carry out this work? And then there is the strange case of the burgeoning American amusement parks at the turn of the 20th century. In addition to rides and exhibits, many of these parks featured an unusual attraction: infantoriums. Visitors of these parks could stroll around with ice cream and swing by these stations, a visit equivalent to that of a fully functional neonatal intensive care unit, complete with incubators filled with sleeping, premature babies. History has been kind to Martin Cooney. Touted as a hero, Cooney was the German mind behind the incubators. His first encounter with premature babies, we are told, was at the 1896 World's Fair. He knew immediately that the exhibition would save babies' lives. The technology to keep premature babies alive was expensive, and he knew the public would pay to see the babies in incubators. He would charge an entrance fee at the amusement parks to generate funds to help these babies live. Nurses tended to the babies as an enraptured public looked on. Like any other amusement, The premature baby exhibits included carnival barkers who tried to lure the public to come and see the babies. I don't know about you, but I find something very off about these incubators. Advertisers featuring living babies. A lot of the fairs where Cooney showed his baby, and the last continent to experience that was very active in the 19th century. Look at the size of it. Charles Dickens was obsessed with this place. Inspiration, they say. The official narrative tells us that an estimated 4,500 women handed over their children to this huge building. But this was just one institution. Wikipedia gives us a partial list of over 64 orphanages that were founded in the UK during the 19th century. The list is only partial. The peculiar case of the vast amount of parentless children in the 19th century is well documented by many researchers. And most of them agree it is almost impossible to establish figures that really do justice to just how many orphans there were during this period. Their footprint did not enter the record books. It formed in the mud and was then washed away. It wasn't just the UK. This was a worldwide phenomenon. New York City had 4 foundling asylums alone that processed thousands of children annually. By the beginning of the 20th century, Italy was reporting 32,000 children per year. Spain and Portugal were reporting 50 again. This is gonna...
One of the most interesting things about this passport going around is it says 3 eye colors: brown, gray, and blue. And I started looking into gray eyes, which goes back to my theory that grays might be not aliens, but different species of people. I do believe these were indoctrination camps or some kind of concentration camp, and that the gray children, the ones with gray eyes, it's very, very rare to have gray eyes. But guess what?
Okay.
So I finished Orphan.
You know, for those of you who've been with me for a while, you know that one of my favorite centuries is the 1800s. And the reason is it's such a mysterious century. I call it the void century because I feel like there's just some kind of gap, something weird happened during the 1800s. But anyway, let's talk about the phenomena of orphan trains and orphans during the 1800s throughout the world. So throughout the world, in the Americas, Europe, Russia, and everywhere else, there is a phenomenon of many, many orphans called foundlings. So let's get right into it. What were the orphan trains? The orphan trains were a series of social service programs that relocated poor and homeless children from 1854 to 1929. More than 200,000 children traveled by train from East Coast to seek new homes in nearly every state in the continental United States. The train stopped at towns where people were waiting to see the select children. A train's arrival would be advertised in advance with handbills, posters, and notices in the newspaper. So this is one of the newspaper advertisements that they had when these orphan trains would arrive in different states throughout the United States. Wanted homes for children. Some were interested in choosing a child to raise on their own, while others were looking for older children who could do housework from chores to other labor. Basically slaves. At each stop, the orphan train riders were lined up at the train depot or other public areas while people looked them over. Boys and girls were often inspected closely to see if they were healthy and suited for hard work. So what an absolutely bizarre phenomenon, orphan trains. From the 1850s to the early 1900s, these orphans were shipped out into every state. almost as if they're repopulating empty cities. A lot of these orphans arrived in places like New York, a lot of buildings, a lot of rooms, but not a lot of people. What a bizarre time. All these advanced looking structures, and then you got horse and buggy people, and then you got dirt roads. Where's the pavement? What in the world happened in the late 1800s where hundreds of thousands of children were abandoned all over the world, oftentimes forced by the state if the mother was unmarried, and then shipped to all parts of the world? These children were called foundlings, and it was a worldwide phenomenon. Once in asylums and hospitals, the children were then given made-up names and sent out from cities to rural areas. They either found foster parents, worked as farmhands, or grew up on their own with a completely new identity and no knowledge of their heritage. So as I stated, this wasn't just in the Americas. This
Some would call the architecture old world, reminiscent of the classic buildings that are found throughout Europe. Indeed, we have a cornucopia of architects.
I tried to tell you that after the last reset, they was repopulating these cities with these artificial babies, and you didn't believe me. But when I say I got your ass, oh, I've got your ass. This is a postcard from 1910, and the message can't be any more clearer. It literally shows a machine with the words repopulation, and the man has a lock and the woman has the key. And if you think that's weird, then listen to this. There was a time when people used the postal service to mail their children. In the early days of the US Parcel Service, there weren't clear guidelines at what you could and couldn't mail. In January 1913, one Ohio couple took advantage of the US Postal Service's new parcel service to make a very special delivery. Their infant son. I mean, come on. What kind of unhumane thing is this? So once upon a time, it was legal to mail a baby in the United States. It happened more than once, and by all accounts. These people are not human. They have to tell you what they're doing. It's a part of their code. And this postal card is showing those artificial babies on those so-called orphan trains being shipped all over the country. I tried.
Orphan trains in the 1900s.
This is a very sad fact of the early days of American capitalism and should be remembered for what it is. They demonized slavery in the South while overlooking what they were doing to people in the North. But, you know, the fact is in the South, they didn't just throw people away and
Oh my days. Now this is how you can rewrite history with the orphan trains.
Ancient alchemy, red mercury, gold, garlic, and a mirror, so let's talk about it. Red mercury and gold, is it the key element behind the...
Yes, babies on display at the World's Fair, and all the while over the years throughout these fairs, there are orphan trains sending hordes of all-white children across the United States. Talk about erasing people's memories. How would they know their history? Yes, babies on display at the World's Fair, and all the while over the years throughout these fairs, there are orphan trains sending hordes of all-white children across the United States. Talk about erasing people's memories. How would they know their history? Yes, babies on display at the World's Fair, and all the while over the years throughout these fairs, there are orphan trains sending...
So I stumbled on something pretty interesting. So I just looked up orphan train on Wikipedia, and not even Wikipedia, just on the normal search bar. But apparently it was a real movement. I thought that the
world is waking up to today has been going on for many years.
At the base of the tree, that the crystals begin to glow just a little bit brighter, and overhead the bunny bees, while they were sprinkling their magic crystal dust.
This creepy Cabbage Patch Kids exhibit in the 1980s makes a lot more sense now.
All right, let's let's do it scientifically. Cross your fingers. And when I say 1, 2, 3, you're going to either say pink, pink, pink for girls or blue, blue, blue for boys. Okay, you ready? 1, 2, 3. Let's go ahead and actually check Mother Cabbage. She always has happy, healthy babies. But this sonogram will determine whether it'll be a girl or a boy. Lot of blue. We've got a boy coming here.
You remember the Cabbage Patch Babies, right? Cabbage Patch Kids, those cute dolls that everybody was going crazy for. Did you know they have a dark history? And I'm not talking about the one where people were breaking their legs and fighting out in public to buy theirs.
Parents are fighting over these dolls.
What we believe were just cute little dolls actually comes from a dark history where people truly believed that you could go and pick your baby out of a cabbage field. People had no idea how babies were made or where they came from. The farmers would plant seeds, and then the couple would go and pick their baby out of a crop. It's the same storyline as the stork, where the stork would go and bring a baby to an awaiting couple. The difference was the parents would go to the farm to pick the Cabbage Patch baby. And if parents were not worthy of receiving these babies, they'd get unalive babies in return as a form of punishment. Graphic warning on this video that I found online, I didn't want to post the full thing. This is from the 1800s, and it was supposedly a fairy going to the Cabbage Patch to pick the babies out. They look like new babies too, like that's a little fresh baby. And give it to the people who were awaiting their child. I don't know if they found this humorous. They also believed that babies couldn't feel pain back then. So the way she's handling the baby, it's weird, but they didn't believe that there was any pain happening. I'll probably never look at Cabbage Patch Babies the same after learning this.
That's all the stuff of it. This is what's left of 4-year-old Emmy Sivage's favorite Christmas present.
This was the only thing that she asked for Christmas.
1983 was a strange time. Oh yes, the Cabbage Patch Kids were being born in strange pretend hospitals from plastic cabbages, so children could adopt them complete with paperwork after this slightly traumatic, weird, surreal experience. Did you have one of these? Because looking back now, it's kind of creepy. 1983.
These Cabbage Patch Babies are symbolic. They're telling you that they can grow humans from scratch. And if they're telling you about it, it means they've been doing it for a very long time.
This is the artificial womb facility, a place where humans could be grown entirely from scratch. The devices you see here are called growth pods. Each growth pod is designed to replicate the same conditions that exist inside the mother's uterus. Growth pods are designed to host human fetuses until they are fully developed. These artificial wombs are designed to help premature babies to continue developing after their birth. But emerging scientific research is making it possible to use them to create designer humans entirely from scratch.
These Cabbage tried to tell you that many people today are descendants of artificial humans and clones, and you didn't believe me. But when I say I got your ass, oh, I've got your ass. So after the mud flood and the Great Reset, they would have needed people to repopulate these cities. That's when the so-called baby incubators come into play. First time the public saw these human growing pods was at the World's Fairs, disguised as incubators for premature babies, at the same time that they came out with the Cabbage Patch Babies. You have to understand, they always tell you what they're doing. You just have to be able to understand the language. By showing us these images, they are telling us that babies can be grown. I know this might be hard for some of you to understand, and it seems impossible. But believe me, nothing's impossible. Any technology that you see them with now, they've had for hundreds of years. So when you wonder where all these children came from in the orphan trains, and why there was no parents, because these children were artificially grown. Oh my days. I tried.
This is what. Come with us.
I tried to tell
powered entirely by renewable energy.
Actolife allows infertile couple to conceive a baby and become the true biological parents of their own offspring. It's a perfect solution for women who had their uterus surgically removed due to cancer or other complications. With Actolife, premature births and C-sections will be a thing of the past. Actolife is designed to help countries that are suffering from severe population decline, including Japan, Bulgaria, South Korea, and many others. The facility features 75 highly equipped labs. Each state-of-the-art lab can accommodate up to 400 growth pods or artificial wombs. Every pod is designed to replicate the exact conditions that exist inside the mother's uterus. A single building can incubate up to 30,000 lab-grown babies per year. Actolife allows your baby to develop in an infection-free environment. The pods are made of materials that prevent germs from sticking to their surfaces. Every growth pod features sensors that can monitor your baby's vital signs, including heartbeat, temperature, blood pressure, breathing rate, and oxygen saturation. The artificial intelligence-based system also monitors the physical features of your baby and reports any potential genetic abnormalities. The pods are equipped with a screen that displays real-time data on the developmental progress of your baby. These data are sent directly to your phone so you can track your baby's health from the comfort of your zone. The app also provides you with a high-resolution live view of your baby's development. A special section in the app allows you to watch a time-lapse of your baby's growth and share it directly with your loved ones. Because babies can recognize language and learn new words while still in the womb, Actolife growth pods feature internal speakers that play a wide range of words and music to your baby. Through the app, you can choose the playlist that your baby listens to. You can also directly sing to your baby and make them familiar with your voice before birth. Our goal is to provide you with an intelligent offspring that truly reflects your smart choices. Actolife improves your bonding experience with your baby. Thanks to a 360 degrees camera that's fitted inside your baby's growth pod, you can use your virtual reality headset to explore what it's like to be in your baby's place. See what they see and hear what they hear. Using a wireless haptic suit connected to your baby's growth pod, you will be able to sense their kicks in the womb and share this experience with your friends and family members.
Actolife.
Very, very pleased to announce that the first baby clone is born. She was born yesterday at 11:55 a.m. in the country where she was born. So this will not give you more details about the location. She's fine. We call her Eve between us. You knew that, of course. Some suggested it, and I thought it was a good idea, actually. You won't have the right name. And, you know, for a long time, I thought that this press conference will be with the baby, the parents, the scientists, everybody surrounding me, and having pleasure announcing it. I'm alone. And there is a reason to that, is that it hasn't been easy to face the world with this announcement. And we have been discussing with the parents the last 3 months how we would handle today.
So before we go any farther on this whole clonade thing, we've got to say there's a lot of speculation that it's not true. They said they didn't present the evidence. We'll have to see after we go through a couple more parts of these series. I guess let's get into it. In December 2002, Bridget held a press conference announcing the cloning of a baby girl. Shortly after, a Dutch spokeswoman claimed that another cloned baby was born to a Dutch lesbian couple. A few days after, another person came forward, this time from South Korea, claiming a baby boy that was comatose for over 2 years was cloned and then born the day before. This time it was a surrogate mother that had participated since the biological mother was now 41 years old and more likely to have complications during the term of pregnancy. And on January 10, 2003, the United States Court of Justice made a decision and ordered CloneAid to reveal the identity of the alleged clone baby and show proof. Yo, that's like 3 different places that now have said they have clones. Like, I don't know, do you guys think it's real?
6,000 years ago, the ancient Egyptians spoke about a race of men that they created. These hairy ape men were said to wreak havoc amongst the people of Egypt. So the Egyptians rounded them up and imprisoned them in the Caucasus Mountains, which they called Europa after their queen Euro, and rope meaning contained or imprisoned. The story relates to that of Tutmosis, who was sent to the Caucasus Mountains to give them language and written knowledge. It should be noted that the Russians have a similar Exodus story in ancient text. These Europa men who terrorized indigenous peoples of the world eventually be portrayed as kings, seers, and holy men. Because of things like the Crusades and the infamous burning of the Library of Alexandria, a lot of the world's history has been distorted to fit the narrative of the winners. More than